when millionaire Nathan Whitmore notices a mysterious birthmark on the wrist of Emily, a poor young waitress, a terrifying family secret awakens. Their quest for the truth unveils the tragic death of a mother and uncovers dark conspiracies that threaten their lives. Can the light of family love triumph over decades of deceitful darkness? Emily Parker felt her hands tremble as the large silver tray was placed into her small, delicate palms. The light from the crystal chandelier sparkling high above momentarily dazzled her eyes. Emily bowed her head, trying to steady the luxurious dishes in her hands, but in truth, it was to hide the fear and unease creeping into her fragile little soul. The young girl was only 12 years old, but her deep blue eyes seemed to have endured a lifetime of hardship. Emily's life was an endless string of days spent in the dark, cramped room of a slum on the outskirts of Belleville, where she battled hunger, cold, and the piercing loneliness every single day. Emily had no idea who her parents were. From the moment she was born, she had been abandoned at the doorstep of Mrs. Margaret Foster, an elderly, impoverished woman with a heart full of kindness. Mrs. Margaret couldn't offer her much beyond love, simple meals and gentle words of advice each morning before Emily left for work. "My dear girl, always hold your head high. Don't let anyone see your sadness." Those words became the only encouragement that kept Emily going through a harsh and deprived existence. Yet Emily harbored a secret she dared not share with anyone. A strange black birthmark, shaped like a coin, marked her left wrist, a mysterious imprint hinting at her true identity, tied to a distant past she couldn't recall. Emily always hid it carefully beneath the frayed sleeves of her long-sleeved shirt. Mrs. Margaret once said the birthmark must be a sign of fate, but to Emily it felt like a curse, something she kept locked away deep in her heart. Tonight, Emily was working as a server at the Golden Swan, the most luxurious restaurant in the city. The place was filled with wealthy patrons dressed in expensive attire, elegant gentlemen and stunningly beautiful ladies. To Emily, it was an alien world, distant and entirely separate from her reality. As the small girl took cautious steps through rows of tables draped in pristine white cloths, her worn-out shoes made faint sounds that went unnoticed by everyone, but her heart pounded fiercely. Emily lived in constant fear of making a mistake, drawing attention to herself, losing her job, and then having nothing to eat the next day. Taking a deep breath, she gently placed the expensive dishes onto table number 7. 3 well-dressed men in luxurious suits were engrossed in a serious conversation, paying her no mind. Emily spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "Enjoy your meal, sir." Suddenly, her sleeve caught on the edge of the table, and her small wrist was briefly exposed to the young man seated directly across from her. Nathan Whitmore, a powerful millionaire renowned in the business world. Emily quickly pulled her sleeve down, her heart racing with panic, but she had no idea that in that fleeting moment Nathan had caught sight of her strange birthmark. Emily turned away swiftly, yet she could still feel Nathan Whitmore's sharp, intense gaze boring into her from behind. That look seemed to pierce through all the secrets she had tried to bury for years. The little girl hurried back to the kitchen, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from her chest. What Emily couldn't possibly foresee was that Nathan's jolting stare marked the beginning of a journey to uncover a horrifying truth, one that would forever alter her destiny. Meanwhile, Nathan Whitmore sat frozen at the dining table, the wine glass in his hand trembling, his eyes wide with shock and dread. The moment he saw the birthmark on that strange little girl's wrist, his heart shattered. He knew exactly to whom that birthmark belonged. It was a mark of fate, dredging up dark secrets about his own family that Nathan had thought were buried forever. And so the fate of Emily Parker, the poor orphaned girl, became irrevocably intertwined with that of Nathan Whitmore, a wealthy man carrying a deep, unspoken pain. The dark secret was on the verge of being unveiled, bringing with it a cascade of tragedy and a test of faith pushed to its very limits. Everything happened so fast, but for Nathan Whitmore, time seemed to freeze in that single moment. Nathan wasn't the type to lose his composure easily. A young millionaire known for his refined and cool-headed demeanor, he always maintained an air of calm pride. But in that fleeting instant just moments ago, all his poised facade shattered completely. His cold blue eyes widened suddenly, pupils dilating in sheer panic as he caught sight of the small, coin-shaped black birthmark on the wrist of the young server standing before him. That birthmark struck like lightning through the depths of his memory, a place he had spent years trying to bury so he'd never have to face it again. Nathan's trembling hands dropped the crystal glass, its shattering crash echoing through the luxurious restaurant like a thunderclap, rupturing the refined atmosphere. Every guest's gaze instantly snapped toward his table. "Wait!" Nathan shot to his feet, his voice ringing out in desperation, hoarse and unfamiliar, a stark contrast to the confident, detached tone people knew him for. "Don't go." Emily froze in shock. She trembled violently at the sudden shout, her heart seeming to stop as she realized the wealthy man was directing his fierce stare at her. Instinctively she stepped back, her wide blue eyes brimming with fear, tears welling up. She couldn't fathom why this man seemed so angry and emotional just from looking at her. Without hesitation, Nathan strode toward Emily. The room fell deathly silent. Diners, servers, and even the restaurant manager stood rooted to the spot, watching Nathan's every agitated move. He closed the distance to the small girl, his eyes fixed on the fragile wrist she was trembling to conceal. "Who is your mother?" Nathan's voice broke through, rough and urgent, as if he were grasping at his last shred of hope before it slipped away. "Tell me, who is your mother?" Emily was so rattled her legs felt like they might give out. She shook her head frantically, her small hands clutching her restaurant uniform in a desperate attempt to hide the mysterious birthmark. I don't know," Emily whimpered through tears, her voice cracking in the stillness. "I don't have a mother. I'm just an orphan." Nathan went still for a long moment, his eyes flooded with pain and confusion. His heart ached as though an old wound had been torn open, reviving all the secrets he thought were long dormant in vivid, agonizing clarity. His friends tried to calm him. "Relax, Nathan, she's just a server." But Nathan brushed them off, his gaze still boring into Emily, unwavering. "Don't lie to me." His tone softened but carried a desperate edge. "That birthmark on your wrist, where did you get it? Tell me the truth, please." Emily shook, tears now streaming down her cheek. She felt utterly terrified and bewildered. The little girl had no idea what was happening or why this stranger was looking at her as if he'd known her for years. "I really don't know. Mrs. Margaret found me at her doorstep when I was a baby," Emily sobbed, her voice breaking as if pleading for Nathan to let her go. "That's all I know, I swear." Nathan stood there like a statue, the world around him blurring. Emily's words cut into his heart like a knife. In that moment, the most painful memory of his life surged back. The image of his beloved mother, Julia Whitmore, who bore an identical birthmark on her wrist. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his voice trembling yet resolute. "Emily, you have to trust me. I need to meet the person who raised you, right now." That moment of destiny had come to pass, and Nathan knew his life and this strange little girl's were now forever entwined. The secret he had tried to bury all these years was resurfacing to challenge everything. Nathan Whitmore's luxurious car glided silently through the bustling streets before turning into the most run-down part of the city, the Belleville Quarter. Emily sat quietly in the passenger seat, her bewildered gaze fixed on the car window. Her small hands trembled as they clutched each other tightly, unable to conceal the overwhelming unease surging in her chest. Nathan fought to steady his ragged breathing, but his heart hadn't stopped trembling since he first saw the birthmark on the girl's wrist. Time felt like it was toying with him, dragging him back to the painful memories of his late mother, Julia Whitmore. He glanced at Emily, his heart tightening. If his instincts were correct, his life and hers would change forever from this moment onward. The car slowed to A stop in front of a small, dilapidated house tucked deep within a narrow alley. Emily stepped out, hesitant and slow. Nathan followed closely behind, a pang of sorrow flashing in his eyes as he took in the place where the little girl had grown up. He'd never imagined that amidst his world of wealth and prestige, such a heartbreaking truth could exist. Inside, the tiny house was dimly lit, illuminated only by the faint glow of an old table lamp. An elderly woman with snow-white hair sat hunched over, her trembling hands meticulously mending a torn shirt. Hearing footsteps, she looked up, her gentle eyes tinged with concern as she saw Emily and the unfamiliar man entering her home. "Emily, you're back early?" Mrs. Margaret Foster's kind voice rang out, though her eyes quickly clouded with worry as they settled on Nathan's face. "Who's this, dear?" Emily froze, unable to respond, but Nathan stepped forward, his gaze earnest and brimming with emotion as he addressed Mrs. Margaret. "Please, don't be afraid. I'm Nathan Whitmore," he introduced himself briefly, his voice quivering with feeling. "I'm here to learn about Emily more, specifically about the birthmark on her wrist." At those words, Mrs. Margaret's face paled abruptly. Her aged hands shook violently, dropping the needle to the floor. She took a deep breath, but her trembling lips struggled to form words. "Why are you asking me about that?" she stammered, her voice choked as if she were suppressing a deeply buried secret. Nathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gently pulled an old photograph from his pocket, a picture of his late mother, Julia Whitmore, her wrist bearing the same distinct black birthmark as Emily's. He placed it on the table and looked deeply into Mrs. Margaret's eyes. "Because my mother had the exact same birthmark, I believe Emily is my biological sister," Nathan said softly, his voice breaking with emotion. "Please, tell me the truth." Emily stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock and pain. Her small heart pounded fiercely, her breath catching as if someone were strangling her. The words she'd just heard were beyond belief. Is this true, Grandma?" Emily asked, her voice trembling on the verge of tears, her desperate gaze pleading with the woman she'd always seen as a mother. Mrs. Margaret remained silent for a long moment, tears spilling from her eyes unnoticed. With shaking hands, she picked up the photograph, her pained gaze shifting to Emily. "Yes, my dear girl." Her voice broke with emotion. "I've hidden it from you for too long. This woman was your real mother. That night, I found you next to her body at the old Ravenswood market. She had the same birthmark as you." Nathan closed his eyes, a wave of searing pain coursing through him. He'd been right, but the truth was far crueler than he'd imagined. Emily wasn't just some orphaned stranger. She was his flesh and blood, the sister he'd never known existed. Emily swayed unsteadily, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't believe she'd finally found her true family, yet the revelation carried such profound sorrow. Are you really my brother?" Emily choked out, her blue eyes brimming with desperation as she sought one final confirmation from Nathan. Nathan knelt before her, gently taking her trembling hand in his gaze warm and resolute. "Yes, Emily, you're my little sister," he said clearly, his voice filled with love and protection. "I swear no one will ever hurt you again." Emily broke down, sobbing in Nathan's arms. In that moment, they both understood that fate had bound these two strangers as siblings. But little did they know, the terrifying secrets lurking within the Whitmore family were only just beginning to surface. The cold night descended over Ravenswood, a place once considered a realm of splendor, now reduced to thorny bushes and barren, forgotten land. Emily pressed close to Nathan, her small steps trembling with every crunch of dry leaves beneath their feet. Nathan gripped the flashlight tightly, trying to suppress the unease constricting his heart. He never imagined he'd return here, to the land tied to the darkest memories of his life. Before the siblings stretched the desolate expanse of Ravenswood, a bleak and shadowy tableau. Emily shivered as a sudden cold gust whipped through, sending her hair into disarray. Nathan gently squeezed her small hand, his gaze reassuring, though deep within his eyes lingered doubt, fear, and an indescribable pain. "Why are we here, Nathan?" Emily whispered, her voice nearly swallowed by the darkness, trembling and laced with dread. Nathan remained silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, as if glimpsing the ghost of their late mother. He took a deep breath, his voice soft yet heavy with sorrow. "Because this is where all our family's secrets are buried. I believe we'll find the truth about Mom's death here." Emily shuddered, her hand instinctively clutching the birthmark on her wrist as though it radiated a mysterious power, guiding the siblings deeper into this dark terrain. Nathan began digging with his bare hands. The ground was cold and hard as stone, but that didn't deter him. Dirt quickly smeared across hands accustomed to lavish dinners and high-stakes meetings, not this rugged labor. Yet he cared for nothing beyond uncovering the truth. Suddenly, his fingers brushed against something hard and icy. His heart clenched, its rhythm quickening. He carefully dug around it, unearthing a small, rusted metal box. Nathan lifted it into the light, his hands trembling as he struggled to pry it open. Inside, a delicate silver necklace gleamed faintly under the dim flashlight beam. Etched clearly on its pendant was a name he could never forget: Julia. His breath caught, his eyes stinging as if an old, healed wound had been ripped open. He gripped the necklace tightly, the raw pain of loss surging from deep within his soul. "Did you find something?" Emily edged closer, her tiny voice tinged with caution and worry. Nathan sat still for a long while, his eyes red-rimmed as he looked up at Emily. He held the necklace out to her, his voice sinking into the vast emptiness. "This belonged to our mother. Julia Whitmore lies here, Emily." Emily froze, tears spilling instantly and falling onto the parched earth. But before either could fully process their emotions, a black car screeched to a halt nearby. Nathan yanked Emily behind a cluster of thorny bushes, their hearts pounding as if they might leap from their chests. A tall man stepped out of the vehicle. Under the pale moonlight, his face radiated a ruthless coldness. Nathan recognized him instantly. Alan Grayson, his father's right-hand man, a figure always present in the Whitmore family's darkest dealings. Alan approached the freshly disturbed earth, his eyes flashing with horror before hardening into fury. He pulled out his phone, his whispered voice taut with menace. "Someone's been here. They've found Julia Whitmore's burial site. You need to handle this immediately, before it's too late." Nathan felt the blood in his veins turn to ice. He gripped Emily's shoulders tightly, their eyes locking in shared desperation and fear. Only now did he realize his mother's death wasn't the accident he'd believed. It was a cold, calculated plot, meticulously concealed behind the facade of his family's power. Alan drove off swiftly, leaving the air steeped in frigid darkness. Nathan and Emily remained motionless in a prolonged silence. Finally, Nathan pulled his sister into a gentle embrace, his voice thick with resolve and pain. "We have to uncover the truth, Emily. For Mom, for you, and for me. I promise no matter what happens, I'll protect you." Emily nestled into Nathan's chest, her hot tears soaking his shirt. Both understood that the darkness awaiting them would be more terrifying than ever. But they couldn't turn back, not now, because the truth about Julia Whitmore had become the only light guiding their lost souls through the shadows of anguished past. The icy night fog slowly enveloped Ravenswood, its chilling tendrils wrapping around like invisible hands, tightening their grip on Emily's trembling heart. Nathan held his little sister close, his breath ragged, every second thick with tension, as if fate were about to deliver a fatal blow. In the pitch-black darkness, the headlights of a black car suddenly pierced through, shining directly at the siblings' hiding spot. Emily flinched, her heart seeming to stop for a moment. Nathan pulled her deeper into the bushes, his sharp, vigilant eyes fixed on the unfamiliar vehicle. The car door swung open and Alan Grayson, the fearsome loyalist of the Whitmore family, stepped out with a chilling calm. He stood motionless for a long moment, his icy gaze sweeping over the undergrowth as if he could sense Nathan and Emily's presence. "Come out, Nathan." Ellen's voice cut through the silence, low and cold, yet sharp as a blade, enough to strike fear into anyone who heard it. "I know you're here. Hiding is pointless." Nathan tightened his grip on Emily's hand, feeling every tremor coursing through her small frame. He whispered into her ear, his voice soft but resolute, "No matter what happens, you run as fast as you can and don't look back." Emily shook her head frantically, tears brimming as she clung to her brother's arm. "No, I won't leave you." Before Nathan could respond, Alan lunged forward, swift as a phantom, yanking Nathan's arm and dragging him from their cover. Nathan struggled fiercely, but Alan's strength was overwhelming, ruthless. He was shoved to the cold ground, pain radiating through his body. "Well, well, how touching," Alan sneered, bending down to glare at Nathan with contempt. "But you're a fool to think you can change the past. Your father will never let these secrets see the light of day." "What did he do to my mother?" Nathan roared, his voice thick with rage, his eyes blazing with a mix of fury and unbearable pain. "Why did he have to kill her?" Alan slowly pulled a silver lighter from his pocket, his fingers toying with the cold gleam flickering in the dark. He leaned close to Nathan's face, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Julia Whitmore was a threat to the family. So is that pitiful little sister of yours. I warned you, Nathan, once you chose to dig into this secret, you'd have to pay with your life." He straightened, his gaze shifting to Emily, who trembled and backed away, her wide eyes filled with panic. Alan advanced toward her slowly, his hand gripping a small, gleaming knife. "I hate to do this, but I have no choice." "Don't touch her," Nathan shouted in desperation, struggling to rise, but Alan coldly stomped on his chest, sending him crashing back down, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Emily retreated in terror, her heart feeling as though it were being crushed. Then, in that peak moment of tension, she heard a voice, her mother's, echoing from deep within her soul, urging her to act. Seizing a fleeting moment of distraction as Alan closed in, Emily grabbed a stick from the ground and with all the feeble strength she could muster, hurled it at him. Alan dodged, letting out a mocking laugh, but his focus wavered just long enough for Nathan to regain his footing. Nathan surged up, tackling Alan with every ounce of strength he had left. They tumbled to the ground, locked in a fierce struggle. Nathan knew this was a fight to protect the sister he'd only just found, the only person left in the world he could love. Emily seized the chance to bolt toward the main road, her small, shaking hands fumbling to pull a phone from her pocket. Gasping for breath, she dialed emergency services, her voice breaking through tears and sheer terror. "Please help us. My brother's in danger. Save him. Ravenswood, please hurry." The distant wail of police sirens pierced the night, red and blue lights flashing through the frigid darkness. Alan froze for a final moment, his cold gaze shifting to anger and panic. He released Nathan and fled into the shadows, but not before turning back to deliver one last haunting threat. "Remember this, Nathan. You'll never escape your family's darkness." Nathan lay still, his breathing labored, feeling the warm tears of Emily fall onto his face. Now they both understood that their battle with the Whitmore family's shadows had only just begun, and the secrets still lurking ahead would be far more terrifying than anything they'd ever imagined. The wail of police sirens grew louder, their piercing sound echoing like a promise of salvation. Emily stood on the edge of Ravenswood's road, her small frame trembling from cold and fear, tears streaming down her face. But what tore at her heart most was the image of Nathan, her brother, now her sole anchor in life, facing Alan Grayson alone, the embodiment of the Whitmore family's darkness and sins. Just minutes earlier, Emily had screamed into the phone for help, her voice choked with desperation. "My brother, he's being attacked. Please come quickly, please." In the thick shroud of Ravenswood's darkness, Nathan was still locked in a fierce struggle with Alan. Powerful blows, ragged breaths, desperation and rage melted together in every movement. Nathan knew he had to win, not just for himself, but for Emily, for their mother, and for the painful secrets his family had buried for far too long. But Alan was too strong, too vicious. He knocked Nathan to the ground once more, then loomed over him, his eyes glinting with ruthless coldness. "You should never have defied your father," Alan snarled, pressing the small knife in his hand against Nathan's throat. "The price of the truth is your life, Nathan." Just as the blade was about to plunge, flashing red and blue lights suddenly illuminated the scene, casting Alan's horrified face into sharp relief. The rapid footsteps of police officers echoed all around, and a commanding voice rang out with authority. "Drop the weapon! Stay where you are!" Alan froze, his eyes widening in panic. Seizing the moment, Nathan summoned every ounce of strength, shoving Alan away. The villain stumbled, collapsing to the ground, instantly surrounded and subdued by the police. Nathan, still dazed and in pain, staggered to his feet, his vision blurred with tears and exhaustion. Emily rushed forward, her small arms wrapping tightly around Nathan as she sobbed uncontrollably, her breath ragged with emotion. "Nathan, I thought you were going to die. I'm sorry I was too late." Nathan gently stroked her hair, managing a faint smile. "It's okay. You saved me." As the police began their investigation, another black car pulled up, this time carrying a man Nathan never expected to see here. Robert Whitmore, his father. Robert stepped out, his once imposing aura of power replaced by weariness, age, and shame. He looked at Nathan, then at Emily, his eyes brimming with anguish and regret. "Father, you did all of this, didn't you?" Nathan asked, his voice breaking with bitterness. Robert stood silent for a long moment before nodding slowly. His voice trembled, hoarse with pain. "I was a coward, Nathan. I allowed this to happen. I feared your mother's defiance, feared what she might reveal, so I turned a blind eye and let Alan handle it all. I killed Julia, not with my hands, but with my silence and cowardice." Each word felt like a dagger plunging into Nathan's heart. The pain he felt now stemmed not just from the past, but from the shattering of everything he'd once believed about his family. "And Emily? Why did you abandon her?" Nathan shouted, his voice raw with fury. Robert bowed his head, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I wanted to protect the family's honor, so I chose to cast her aside. It's the greatest sin of my life. I don't dare ask for your forgiveness, but at least you deserve the truth." The air fell silent, broken only by Emily's stifled sobs. Nathan held his sister tightly, his eyes filled with resolve as he looked at his father one last time. "This truth may hurt, but I'd rather face it than live my whole life in the shadows like you did." Robert nodded quietly, his gaze heavy with profound remorse. "You're right, Nathan. It's time the Whitmore family's darkness comes to an end." Nathan stood beside Emily, watching as their father walked away, surrounded by police. He understood that from this moment on, the past would no longer cast a shadow over their lives. Though the truth was brutally painful, it at least allowed them to begin anew, with the radiant light of courage and genuine love. A beautiful morning dawned, with golden sunlight gently pouring over the city, dispelling the dark days that Nathan and Emily had endured. Nathan stood by the large window of their new office, his gaze softening as it fell on Emily, his little sister, who was carefully arranging white hydrangea bouquets in a glass vase at the center of the room. These were the flowers their mother, Julia Whitmore, had loved most. The room was more than just a workspace. It was the headquarters of a new charitable foundation called Julia's Hope, a beacon of hope that Nathan and Emily had built together to honor their beloved mother. Since the day Robert Whitmore confessed the family's painful secrets and faced the consequences of the law, the siblings had decided to use part of their remaining inheritance to bring light to others still trapped in darkness. Emily gazed up at the sign bearing her mother's name, her eyes shimmering with emotion and pride. Her hand gently brushed the framed portrait of Julia, a mother she had never met but who had now become the greatest inspiration in her life. "Nathan," Emily whispered softly, her voice tinged with a hint of tears. Do you think Mom would be happy knowing we're doing this?" Nathan stepped beside her, resting a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I'm certain she's smiling down on us. She always wanted a better life for kids like you. Now we're making that happen for her." Emily smiled faintly, feeling a strange warmth spreading through her heart. Though their past was filled with pain and loss, their mother's love had become the strength that kept them standing and moving forward. In the days that followed, Julia's hope began to make an impact in the community. Orphaned children and those in desperate circumstances gradually found light through the kindness and genuine care that Nathan and Emily offered. To them, every smile on the face of a once hopeless child felt like Julia was still alive, still walking beside them, beaming with pride. One radiant sunset, Nathan and Emily stood before Julia's grave. Emily gently placed a bouquet of hydrangeas down, her voice soft as a breeze. "Mom, even though I never got to meet you, you've taught me the most precious lesson of my life. Love is stronger than any secret, stronger than any darkness. I promise to live well and spread your love everywhere." Nathan wrapped his arm tenderly around his sister, his eyes lifting to the sky as if sending a heartfelt thank you to the mother who had sacrificed everything to protect them. In that moment, he understood her message more clearly than ever. Only by facing the truth and choosing love over hatred could a person truly break free from the shadows and step into the light of hope and renewal. And so, Nathan and Emily walked into the future with the belief that their lives were truly beginning anew, a life brimming with light and love, just as Julia had always wished for her children.